The crystal fields of Lunaria gleamed under the light of 3 moons, casting rainbow refractions across the landscape like scattered dreams. Among the perfect formations, a lone figure moved with practiced efficiency, her harvesting tools making soft, scraping sounds against the mineral deposits. Alara kept her head down, her thick protective hood obscuring the asymmetrical patterns of iridescent scales that marked her left face and neck, patterns that had condemned her to solitude among her symmetry-obsessed species. Unlike other Lunarians, whose skin emitted a controlled, elegant glow in harmonious patterns, Alara's bioluminescence flared unpredictably, especially when her emotions ran high. Even now, as she worked alone in the pre-dawn hours to avoid the judging eyes of others, faint pulses of blue-green light escaped from beneath her heavy cloak. Defective, they called her, unmarriageable, unpredictable. Each judgment had crystallized over her 26 cycles until she believed them herself, accepting her place on the margins of their society. The Lunarian civilization prided itself on perfection in their crystal architecture, in their mathematical society, and most importantly in their physical forms. There was no room for anomalies like Alara. She straightened, her back aching from hours of careful harvesting. The central collection facility wouldn't open for several more hours, giving her time to rest before facing the inevitable sneers of the receiving officials. Alara retreated to her favorite outcropping, a quiet ledge overlooking the vast mineral basin that supplied the energy needs of her entire world. The solitude was both her punishment and her refuge. Here, at least, no one whispered when her skin flickered with uncontrolled light. No potential mate looked upon her with disgust before turning away. No family members lowered their voices in shame when discussing her future. A sudden streak of fire across the night sky jerked her from her thoughts. Something was entering Lunaria's atmosphere, something foreign and unexpected. Alara watched, transfixed, as the object descended rapidly, smoke trailing behind it like a comet's tail. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. The trajectory was too controlled, too deliberate despite its obvious distress. The object, a craft of some kind, disappeared behind the jagged crystal formations to the east, the crash sending vibrations through the ground beneath her feet. Silence followed, then a distant plume of dust rising into the moonlight. Curiosity warred with caution. The Lunarian authorities would eventually investigate, but they were notoriously slow to respond to incidents in the outer fields. By the time they arrived, whatever, or whoever, had crashed might be beyond help. Against better judgment, Alara gathered her tools and headed toward the crash site. As she approached, the acrid smell of burned metal and unfamiliar chemicals grew stronger. The craft was unlike anything she'd seen before, not the sleek, crystalline vessels of Lunarian design, but something bulkier, more utilitarian. A panel on its side had been partially dislodged, and from within she heard a groan. Approaching cautiously, Alara peered inside to see a figure slumped over control panels flashing with warning lights. The being wasn't Lunarian, no luminescent skin, no iridescent scales. Instead, it had flat, solid-colored skin in a warm bronze tone, dark hair, and a completely symmetrical face. A human, she realized. She'd read about them in the planetary archives, but never expected to encounter one. As if sensing her presence, the human's eyes fluttered open, deep brown and disoriented. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. "Help," he managed in a language her translator implant barely recognized. "Please." Alara hesitated only a moment before her hood fell back, her uncontrolled bioluminescence illuminating the crashed vessel in pulses of blue-green light. The human's eyes widened, but not with the disgust she expected, with wonder. It was the first time anyone had ever looked at her that way. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Theo's consciousness wavered as the strange, glowing woman helped him from the wreckage of his research vessel. Every movement sent pain radiating from his ribs, but he remained transfixed by his rescuer's appearance. Her skin pulsed with internal light that followed no discernible pattern, sometimes bright enough to illuminate their path through the crystal fields, sometimes dimming to barely visible ripples beneath her unusual scaled skin. "Can you walk further?" she asked, her voice melodic despite the mechanical undertone of whatever translation device she was using. "My dwelling is not far." Theo nodded, leaning heavily on her surprisingly strong frame. "I'm Theo Mason," he managed, xenogeologist from Earth's Interplanetary Research Division. "I am Alara," she replied simply, as though her name was all the identity she possessed. They trudged in silence through a landscape that seemed crafted from pure light. Crystals of varying sizes jutted from the ground, each capturing and refracting the glow of 3 moons overhead. Under different circumstances, Theo would have been taking samples immediately. These formations contained exactly the energy-conducting minerals his mission sought to study. Alara led him to what appeared to be a natural cave formed within a massive crystal formation. Inside, the space opened unexpectedly into a modest but comfortable dwelling. Unlike the angular, symmetrical architecture he'd glimpsed in the distance, Alara's home embraced the natural contours of the cave, with simple furnishings that complemented rather than fought against the crystalline environment. "The authorities will eventually find your craft," she said, helping him to a cushioned surface that conformed to his body as he sat. "But they seldom venture to the outer fields without purpose." As she gathered what appeared to be medical supplies, Theo studied her more carefully. One side of her face and neck displayed intricate, overlapping scales in shimmering blues and greens, while the other side showed smoother skin with only hints of iridescence. The asymmetry was striking, beautiful in its uniqueness. "Why did you help me?" he asked as she applied a cool, gelatinous substance to his forehead that immediately numbed the pain. Alara paused, her bioluminescence flickering briefly brighter. "I am not sure." She seemed genuinely puzzled by her own actions. "No one comes to these outer reaches except me. If I hadn't found you, you might have died before the authorities arrived." "Then I'm doubly grateful," Theo said, offering a smile that caused her luminescence to pulse again, this time in what he interpreted as surprise. "You should rest," she said abruptly, turning away. "Your injuries aren't severe, but your body needs time to heal." Theo complied, though sleep came fitfully. He woke several times to find Alara sitting motionless nearby, her glow dimmed to a soft pulse that matched what he assumed was her breathing. Once, he caught her studying a small personal device, images of perfectly symmetrical beings with controlled, patterned luminescence flashing across its surface, before she noticed his wakefulness and quickly shut it off. By morning, if the subtly different quality of light filtering through the crystal walls could be called morning, Theo felt strong enough to sit up without assistance. "Your people," he began as Alara prepared a meal of crystalline fruits and something resembling bread. "They look different from you." Her movements stilled, her light patterns briefly chaotic before steadying. "I am not what is considered ideal among Lunarians. Because of your asymmetry, your bioluminescence." Alara nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Both are considered defects. My kind values perfect symmetry and controlled light patterns." She gestured to her left side where the scales were most prominent. "These are seen as a regression to our evolutionary past, not a desired trait, and my inability to control my luminescence marks me as emotionally undisciplined." Theo frowned. "On Earth, we have a saying, variation is the spice of life. Many human cultures celebrate uniqueness rather than conformity." "Your species sounds chaotic," she replied, but there was a hint of wistfulness in her tone. "Wonderfully so," Theo agreed, "though we've had our own struggles with accepting differences." He accepted the food she offered, finding it surprisingly palatable with a crystalline sweetness. "So you live out here alone because you're different." "I work the outer crystal fields because it allows me solitude," she explained. "Lunarians find my appearance disturbing." Before Theo could respond, a high-pitched tone emanated from somewhere in the dwelling. Alara's luminescence flared with what he now recognized as anxiety. "The Central Authority has discovered your vessel," she explained, checking a communication device. "They're searching for you." "Is that bad?" "Not necessarily, but," she hesitated, "they will want to quarantine you in the central city, study you. Your arrival is unprecedented." Theo stood carefully, testing his injured ribs. "Then I should meet them. Explain my research mission. Earth and Lunaria have no formal diplomatic relations yet, but my presence here is peaceful." Alara's bioluminescence dimmed noticeably. "Yes, that would be best." Something in her tone made Theo pause. "Will you come with me? I wouldn't have survived without your help, they should know that." Her eyes, opalescent and wide, met his with genuine surprise. "They won't care what I've done. My word holds no value." "It does to me," Theo said firmly, "and I'll make sure they understand that." For a moment, Alara's entire body glowed with an intensity that transformed her from merely unusual to breathtaking. The luminescence followed the asymmetrical patterns of her scales, creating a natural light show more beautiful than any symmetrical design could achieve. "No one has ever," she began, then stopped herself. "The officials will be at your crash site within the hour. We should prepare." As they gathered supplies for the journey to meet the authorities, Theo noticed how Alara pulled her hood forward again, diminishing her light until it was barely visible. The gesture seemed so practiced, so instinctual, the physical embodiment of making oneself smaller to avoid notice. "You don't need to hide," he said gently. Alara's hands stilled on her cloak. "You don't understand how they see me." "Maybe not," Theo admitted, "but I know how I see you, and there's nothing there that should be hidden." Though she completed the motion of covering herself, something in Alara's posture changed. A slight straightening of her shoulders, a momentary flicker of brighter light escaping from beneath her hood. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was the first crack in a lifetime of learned shame. Together, they left the sanctuary of her dwelling, heading toward a confrontation that would change the course of both their lives. The central authority of Lunaria had established Theo in a research facility that bordered the mineral fields, a compromise he had negotiated after firmly refusing to be quarantined in the city center. The transparent dome structure allowed him to conduct his geological studies while remaining under observation, though he suspected the arrangement was as much to keep him away from the general Lunarian population as it was to accommodate his work. It had been 14 days since his crash landing, and despite the authorities' initial reluctance, Alara had been permitted to assist with his research. The officials had been visibly uncomfortable with her presence, their perfectly controlled light patterns flickering with what Theo now recognized as distaste whenever they addressed her. "These crystal formations have remarkable conductive properties," Theo noted as he examined a sample through his portable analyzer. "The molecular structure allows for energy transfer with almost no degradation." Alara nodded, carefully categorizing the specimens they'd collected. She kept her hood up despite the privacy of the research dome, a habit Theo had gently challenged without success. "The deepest deposits are in the restricted caverns," she said, pointing to a topographical map they'd constructed. "The authority never harvests there because of the instability, but those crystals would have the properties you're seeking." Theo studied the map. "Why didn't you mention these caves before?" Her luminescence flickered briefly beneath her cloak. "The crystal storms there are unpredictable, dangerous. No one goes there." "But you have," Theo guessed, watching her closely. Alara hesitated. "Sometimes, when I need true solitude." Her voice dropped lower. "The patterns in those deep crystals, they're like my scales, asymmetrical, chaotic, beautiful." The admission hung between them, intimate in its vulnerability. Over the past 2 weeks, these moments had become more frequent, small revelations Alara shared tentatively, as though testing whether each truth would drive him away. "I'd like to see them," Theo said softly. "The authority would never approve an expedition there." Theo smiled. "I didn't say we should ask permission." Alara's luminescence brightened in shock, visible even through her heavy cloak. "You would risk censure." "For scientifically valuable samples? Absolutely." He didn't add that his interest went far beyond the research potential. Every day spent with Alara revealed new facets of her intelligence and strength, qualities her society had foolishly dismissed because of her appearance. They planned their expedition carefully, gathering equipment while maintaining the pretense of working within the approved areas. 3 days later, before dawn, they slipped away from the research dome, taking advantage of a shift change in the officials monitoring Theo's work. The journey to the restricted caverns took several hours, leading them deep beneath Lunaria's crystalline surface. As they descended, the temperature rose noticeably, and the crystals grew more vibrant, less orderly but somehow more alive with energy. "The atmospheric conditions here are unusual," Alara explained as they navigated a narrow passage. "The combination of heat and mineral gases can trigger sudden energy discharges through the crystal matrices, what we call storms." "Can they be predicted?" "Only moments before they begin. There's a distinctive vibration through the crystal floor, then—" She stopped abruptly, grabbing his arm. "Like that." Theo felt it, a subtle tremor beneath his feet, then a high-pitched resonance that made his teeth ache. Alara's grip tightened. "We need shelter now." They sprinted toward a recessed alcove Alara indicated, barely reaching it before the air itself seemed to ignite. Energy arced between crystal formations in brilliant white-blue flashes, the thunderous cracks echoing through the cavern. The display was terrifying and mesmerizing, like lightning captured in slow motion, each bolt lingering as it traced the crystal structures. "It's incredible," Theo breathed, instinctively pulling Alara closer as a particularly powerful discharge struck nearby. "Yes," she whispered, her attention fixed on the spectacle. "This is why I come here." In the storm's glow, Theo realized Alara had allowed her hood to fall back. Her luminescence responded to the energy in the air, rippling across her scales in complex, unpredictable patterns that mirrored the storm itself. The asymmetry of her features, rather than appearing as a flaw, seemed a perfect adaptation to this environment, as though she were part of the cavern's natural beauty. "You're magnificent," he said, the words escaping before he could consider them. Alara turned to him, her opalescent eyes wide with surprise. The storm's energy and his words had broken through her careful control. Her entire body now pulsed with light that shifted through blues, greens, and rare flashes of purple. "No one has ever looked at me and seen beauty," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm's rage. "Then no one has truly seen you." The moment suspended between them, charged as the air around them. Theo reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away and trace the pattern of scales along the left side of her face. Rather than flinching as he expected, Alara leaned into his touch, her luminescence intensifying wherever his fingers made contact. "On Earth," he said quietly, "there's a concept called bioluminescent courtship. Certain creatures use light to attract their perfect match, a unique signature that calls out across the darkness." "What a strange way to find connection," she murmured, though her light pulsed brighter. "Is it?" Theo's hand cradled her face now. "Your light called to me across the stars, Alara. I crashed on this planet by accident, but finding you feels like purpose." The storm around them began to subside, but the energy between them only intensified. When Theo leaned forward, Alara met him halfway. Their kiss was tentative at first, an exploration of unfamiliar territory, before deepening with mutual discovery. Alara's luminescence enveloped them both, casting moving shadows through the alcove as her light responded to every sensation. When they finally parted, Alara's entire body glowed with an intensity that illuminated the cavern around them. For the first time since he'd known her, she made no attempt to dim her light or hide her asymmetrical features. Instead, she stood before him fully revealed, vulnerable and radiant. "I've spent my life trying to contain this," she said, looking down at her glowing skin. "Trying to be less to fade into shadows." "You were never meant for shadows," Theo replied, taking her hands in his. "You belong in light." As the storm's final energies dissipated, they remained in the alcove, talking as they never had before. Alara shared the pain of her isolation, the constant reminders of her inadequacy by Lunarian standards. Theo spoke of Earth's troubled history with difference, its ongoing struggle to value diversity over conformity. "Your world sounds imperfect," Alara said. "Gloriously so," Theo agreed. "Like us." Their conversation gave way to touches, exploratory, reverent touches that traced patterns across skin both alien and increasingly familiar. In the aftermath of the storm, surrounded by crystals still humming with residual energy, they discovered each other's bodies with the same curiosity with which they'd approached their research. Alara's luminescence responded to every caress, creating a feedback loop of light and sensation that guided Theo to places that intensified her pleasure. What began as gentle exploration evolved into passionate discovery, their bodies finding harmony despite their differences. Afterward, as they lay together on the cavern floor, Alara's natural light pulsed in slow, satisfied waves that matched her breathing. For the first time, she seemed completely at peace with her uncontrolled luminescence. "When we return," she said, trailing fingers across Theo's chest, "the authority will know what happened between us." "How?" Her lips curved into a rare smile. "My light, it changes permanently after intimate bonding. It's biological, unavoidable." Theo kissed her forehead. "Good, I have no desire to hide what I feel for you." "My people won't understand." "Then we'll help them see differently." As they eventually gathered their research samples and prepared to return to the surface, Alara left her hood down, her newly altered luminescence visible for anyone they might encounter. The crystal storm had passed, but something fundamental had shifted within her. A storm of a different kind that had washed away years of shame and revealed something stronger beneath. They ascended toward the surface, hand in hand, carrying not just valuable mineral samples, but the first fragile strands of a bond that would challenge everything the Lunarians thought they knew about perfection. The central authority chamber gleamed with perfect symmetry. Every crystal pillar precisely matched its counterpart across the circular space, every light panel calibrated to emit identical patterns of illumination. The 7 council members sat in an arc, their own bioluminescence synchronized to pulse in unified rhythm, a physical manifestation of their aligned thinking. Ilara stood before them, her unhooded asymmetrical features and unpredictable light patterns a stark rebellion against the harmonious backdrop. Beside her, Theo maintained a respectful silence while the chief counselor spoke. "Your research visa has been approved for extension, Dr. Mason," the tall, elegantly proportioned Lunarian announced. Her voice carried the musical cadence characteristic of their species, but none of the warmth. "The mineral samples you've collected show promising applications for both our worlds. Earth's Interplanetary Research Division will be pleased." "Thank you, Counselor Vendra," Theo replied with a slight bow. "The cooperation of Lunaria has been invaluable to my work." "However," Vendra continued, her gaze shifting coldly to Ilara, "we must address the matter of inappropriate fraternization. Worker Ilara's biological signature indicates intimate contact has occurred. This violates several protocols regarding interspecies relations." Ilara's luminescence flared briefly before she regained composure. In the 4 weeks since their experience in the crystal caverns, she had grown increasingly comfortable with her natural light patterns, even among other Lunarians. The stares and whispers that had once crippled her now slid off like water on crystal. "With respect, Counselor," Theo interjected, "Earth holds no such prohibitions against consensual relationships between sentient species." "You are not on Earth, Dr. Mason," another council member stated, "and Ilara, despite her irregularities, remains a citizen of Lunaria subject to our traditions." "Traditions," Ilara spoke for the first time, her voice steady, "not laws." A ripple of discomfort passed through the synchronized light patterns of the council members, the equivalent of a collective gasp. "You overstep, Worker Ilara," Vendra warned. "I've spent my life under steeping," Ilara countered, "hiding in shadows to avoid disturbing the harmony you value so deeply." Her luminescence brightened with purpose rather than embarrassment. "I've researched our historical records. There is no law forbidding relationships between Lunarians and other sentient species, only traditions based on maintaining our genetic purity." The Council's unified light pattern faltered momentarily as members exchanged glances. "Nonetheless," Vendra recovered smoothly, "Dr. Mason's extended visa is for research purposes only. He will depart in 14 days once his final samples are processed. You will return to your assigned duties in the outer crystal fields." The pronouncement hung in the air like a crystal shard, sharp and unyielding. Theo stepped forward. "I wish to formally request that Ilara be granted permission to accompany me to Earth as a cultural ambassador. Her knowledge of Lunarian crystal formations would be invaluable to ongoing research." "Impossible," declared Vendra. "No Lunarian has ever left our planet. The physical demands alone have been thoroughly assessed," Theo interrupted, producing a data tablet. "Earth's atmospheric composition is compatible with Lunarian physiology. The journey poses no greater risk to Ilara than it does to me." "This request is denied," Vendra stated without consulting the other council members. "This session is concluded." Outside the chamber, beneath the 3 rising moons, Ilara leaned against a crystal formation, her luminescence dimmer than it had been in weeks. "They fear what they don't understand," Theo said softly, taking her hand. "But fear isn't a sufficient reason to keep us apart." "I've never considered leaving Lunaria," Ilara admitted. "Even at my lowest moments, this planet, these crystal fields, they're part of me." "And they always will be," Theo assured her. "But you're more than just a product of this place. You deserve the chance to discover what else you might become." A small group of younger Lunarians passed nearby, their curious gazes lingering on the pair. Unlike the council members, several of these youths displayed subtle variations in their light patterns. not as dramatic as Alara's, but noticeable departures from the rigid synchronization of the older generation. One young female broke away from the group, approaching with determined steps. "You're Alara," she said without preamble, "the one who works the outer fields." Alara nodded, automatically tensing for the familiar mockery. Instead, the young Lunarian's light pattern shifted to a soft blue-green, a sign of admiration. "I've seen you at the collection facility. The way you harvest without disrupting the crystal matrices, it's remarkable. No one else achieves your yield percentages." "Thank you," Alara replied, genuine surprise evident in her voice. "Is it true you're bonded to the human researcher?" The young Lunarian's companion joined them, his own luminescence revealing similar irregularities, subtle asymmetrical patterns along his neck. "We are connected," Theo answered, squeezing Alara's hand. "And the council forbids you to leave together," the female's light patterns revealed indignation. "That seems archaic." "Many of us feel the old ways are too restrictive," her companion added. "The obsession with perfect symmetry, the suppression of natural light patterns, these traditions served their purpose when our society was young, but now they hold us back," the female finished. "We've been monitoring transmissions from other worlds. Most advanced civilizations embrace diversity rather than uniformity." Alara's luminescence brightened with hope. "You're not alone in these thoughts." "There are many of us," the male confirmed. "Not enough to change council policy immediately, but growing. Your situation has become something of a catalyst for discussion among the younger generations." After the young Lunarians departed, Theo turned to Alara with renewed determination. "Change is happening, with or without the council's blessing." "But not quickly enough to help us," Alara pointed out. "Perhaps not through official channels," Theo agreed. "But in my research, I've discovered something about your planet's legal framework. The Council enforces traditions, but actual laws are recorded in the ancient crystal archives. If we could access those archives—" "No one accesses the archives without Council approval," Alara interrupted. "They're housed beneath the Central Authority building, heavily restricted." Theo's expression shifted to one she recognized, the same look he'd had before suggesting they visit the restricted caverns. "Your expertise is in crystal formations, correct, and the archive chamber would be constructed of the oldest, most stable crystal structures on Lunaria." Understanding dawned in Alara's opalescent eyes. There would be maintenance access points for workers who service the structural integrity. "Workers like you." A slow smile spread across Alara's face, her luminescence brightening with excitement. "Not exactly like me, but I know someone who might help us." Over the next 7 days, they executed their plan with careful precision. Alara reconnected with Marin, a maintenance worker she had once helped during a difficult harvest season. Though initially reluctant, Marin granted them after-hours access to the maintenance corridors beneath the Central Authority building. The ancient crystal archives were even more impressive than Theo had imagined. Towering structures of pure, flawless crystal that stored millennia of Lunarian law and history through complex refraction patterns. While Alara kept watch, Theo used his scientific equipment to scan and translate the relevant legal sections. "I've found it," he whispered triumphantly on their 3rd night of secret research. "The Covenant of Self-Determination, dating back to Lunaria's earliest days. It states explicitly that no citizen can be prevented from choosing their own path, including departure from the planet, provided they're of sound mind and pose no threat to society." "The Council ignores this law?" Alara asked, peering at the ancient text. "They've interpreted it narrowly for generations," Theo explained. "But the original language is clear. They have no legal right to prevent you from leaving if that's your choice." "They'll claim I'm not of sound mind," Alara said bitterly. "That my asymmetry and inability to control my luminescence indicate neural irregularity." Theo's eyes lit with inspiration. "What if we could prove the opposite, that your irregularities are actually evolutionary advantages?" Their remaining days on Lunaria were spent gathering evidence. They returned to the deep crystal caverns, documenting how Alara's asymmetrical scales and unpredictable luminescence allowed her to navigate the energy storms that disoriented other Lunarians. They compiled her harvest records, proving her superior yield despite working alone in the most challenging terrain. Most crucially, they connected with more young Lunarians who shared similar variations, creating a growing movement that questioned the rigid standards that had dominated their society for generations. On the evening before Theo's scheduled departure, they met in Alara's dwelling in the Crystal Caves. Their lovemaking that night carried a desperate edge, each touch a memorization, each kiss a promise that transcended the uncertainty they faced. "If they refuse to acknowledge the law," Alara whispered as they lay entwined, her luminescence casting gentle, shifting patterns across their skin, "I'll stay and continue the work we've started. The younger generation is ready for change." Theo traced the beautiful asymmetrical scales along her shoulder. "I'm not leaving without you." "You must," she insisted. "Your research is too important to both our worlds, and if you stay," her voice caught, "they'll never let us be together openly." "Then we fight," Theo said simply, "together." As dawn approached, they prepared for their final confrontation with the Council. Whatever the outcome, they had already changed Lunaria in ways that would continue long after this day, through the young Lunarians who had begun to embrace their natural variations, through the ancient laws brought back into the light, and through the love between two beings who had found perfection in their glorious imperfection. The Central Authority Chamber buzzed with unprecedented activity. Word of Alara and Theo's discovery in the ancient archives had spread, drawing a crowd that spilled beyond the chamber's crystal doors. Young Lunarians with visible variations, subtle asymmetries, unique light patterns, stood shoulder to shoulder with traditionalists whose synchronized luminescence pulsed with agitation. At the center of it all, Alara stood before the council, her luminescence radiating confidence. Beside her, Theo maintained a supportive presence while allowing her to command the moment that would define both their futures. "The covenant of self-determination is clear," Alara stated, her voice carrying throughout the chamber. "No citizen shall be prevented from choosing their own path, including departure from our world." Councillor Vendra's precisely controlled light pattern flickered with irritation. "The covenant applies to sound-minded individuals, your physiological irregularities." "Are adaptations, not defects," Alara interrupted, activating a holographic display. "Dr. Mason and I have compiled extensive evidence demonstrating the evolutionary advantages of traits previously dismissed as flaws." The display showed Alara navigating crystal storms that would disorient most Lunarians, her asymmetrical scales providing unique protection against energy discharges. Additional data demonstrated how workers with variable luminescence patterns achieved higher harvest yields in challenging conditions. "Furthermore," she continued, "we've identified 27 young Lunarians with similar traits, all of whom excel in their respective fields despite being marginalized for their differences." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as several of these individuals stepped forward, their varied luminescence creating a mosaic of light that contrasted sharply with the council's uniform glow. "This changes nothing," another councillor declared. "Tradition dictates." "Tradition is not law," came a new voice. Marin, the maintenance worker who had helped them access the archives, stepped forward. "I've served the crystal structures of this chamber for 40 cycles. My work allows your governance to continue, yet you've never truly seen me." Other workers emerged from the crowd, the invisible foundation upon which Lunarian society rested, many bearing the subtle variations their society had taught them to hide. "The archives contain another document," Theo added, producing a crystal data shard. "The prophecy of evolution, written by your most revered ancestor, Celia the Farseer. It predicts a time when those bearing the marks of change will lead Lunaria to new horizons beyond our crystal shores." The chamber fell silent. Celia's writings were sacred to Lunarians, her predictions having guided their society through multiple crises. That this particular prophecy had been buried was telling. Vendra's luminescence dimmed slightly as she conferred with her fellow councillors. The synchronized patterns of their communication faltered, revealing individual variations in their thinking for the first time. "Even if we were to acknowledge these interpretations," Vendra finally said, "there remains the practical matter of interspecies physiological compatibility. No Lunarian has ever survived long-term exposure to alien environments." "That concern is addressed here," Theo said, presenting his research. "Earth's atmosphere contains all elements necessary for Lunarian survival, with minimal adaptations to living quarters, specifically mineral supplements in water systems. A Lunarian can thrive there indefinitely. A young council member named Taurus, whose own luminescence occasionally showed slight irregularities, leaned forward. If what you say is true, this could open unprecedented possibilities for our species. Cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, expansion beyond our limited resources. Precisely, Alara agreed. My departure wouldn't be an ending but a beginning. The debate continued for hours, tradition clashing with innovation, fear wrestling with hope. As the three moons rose outside, casting triple shadows through the crystal chamber, the council retreated to deliberate. Alara and Theo waited in the antechamber, surrounded by supporters. The young female Lunarian who had first approached them days ago introduced herself properly as Neri, a junior crystal engineer. Whatever they decide, she told Alara, you've already changed us. Many of us have lived half-lives hiding our variations. Seeing you stand proudly has given us courage. The council fears change, Marin added, his weathered face solemn. But they fear obsolescence more. Your evidence is compelling not just legally but practically. Our crystal resources diminish each cycle. Eventually, we must look beyond Lunaria. When the council finally summoned them back, the chamber had emptied of all but the most essential witnesses. Vendra's expression remained impassive, her luminescence perfectly controlled. The council remains divided on the wisdom of permitting a Lunarian to depart our world, she announced. However, we are unanimous in our conclusion that we cannot legally prevent Citizen Alara from exercising her rights under the covenant of self-determination. A ripple of light cascaded through Alara's body, pure, unfiltered joy. Furthermore, Vendra continued, we propose establishing a formal cultural exchange program, with Alara serving as our first ambassador to Earth, contingent upon regular communication and health monitoring. Taurus, the younger council member, stepped forward. I move that we also establish a commission to reevaluate our traditional standards regarding physiological variation, considering the evidence presented today. Vendra's light pattern revealed her displeasure, but she nodded curtly. The motion is recorded. This matter is concluded. Outside the chamber, beneath the three moons that had witnessed every moment of Alara's isolation and now witnessed her triumph, she turned to Theo with luminescence that outshone the stars. Tomorrow we leave for Earth, she whispered, still processing this new reality. Tomorrow, Theo confirmed, drawing her close, we begin. Their final night on Lunaria was spent in Alara's crystal cave dwelling. They made love with a new freedom, not the desperate intensity of potential separation, but the joyful exploration of a shared future. Alara's luminescence responded to every touch, creating patterns that danced across the crystal walls in ever-changing kaleidoscopes of light. I never imagined leaving this place, she murmured afterward, tracing patterns on Theo's chest. Even in my dreams of acceptance, I pictured remaining here, perhaps working the fields with more dignity. Are you afraid? Theo asked gently. Yes, she admitted, but not enough to stay. Her luminescence pulsed with determination. All my life I was told my differences made me less. You helped me see they make me more. Your differences helped you survive isolation, Theo said. Your strength helped you endure rejection, but it was your courage that changed your world. Dawn brought a small gathering at the landing field where Theo's repaired research vessel awaited. The group of supportive younger Lunarians had come to witness history, the first of their kind to venture beyond their crystal world. Neri pressed a small crystal formation into Alara's hands. From the deep caverns, she explained, to remind you of home when Earth's sights and sounds overwhelm you. Marin and others offered similar tokens, small pieces of the world that had both rejected and shaped her. Alara accepted each with gratitude, her luminescence responding uniquely to each giver in a way that felt like intimate farewells. As they prepared to board, Counselor Taurus arrived unexpectedly. The Council has appointed me liaison to Earth's Interplanetary Research Division, he announced. We'll be in regular contact regarding the exchange program. Other Lunarians have already expressed interest in following your path. Those with variations, Alara guessed. Taurus's luminescence flickered with amusement. Some, but also traditionalists curious about the universe beyond our shores. You've awakened something long dormant in our people, Alara, the spirit of exploration. The boarding sequence completed, Ilara took her position beside Theo in the command module. Through the viewports, the crystalline landscape of Lunaria glittered beneath the rising sun. For a moment, doubt flashed through her, visible in a sudden surge of her luminescence. "Second thoughts?" Theo asked, understanding her silent language. "Gratitude," she corrected. "This world shaped me even in its rejection. I carry it with me just as I'll carry what I discover on Earth." As the engines engaged and the vessel rose from Lunarian soil, Ilara's luminescence reached its most brilliant intensity yet, not in the chaotic patterns of her youth, but in deliberate, flowing waves that embraced her asymmetry rather than fighting it. The light filled the command module, refracting through the crystal tokens from her friends and creating a miniature version of the storm she had once found solace in. "Beautiful," Theo whispered, the colors playing across his face. "Yes," Ilara agreed, watching her home world shrink beneath them. "It is." The crystal planet grew smaller until it was merely the brightest point in a field of stars. Looking ahead toward the blue-green sphere that would become their new home, Ilara allowed her natural light to flow freely, a beacon guiding them forward, illuminating not just their path, but their shared potential. As Lunaria faded from view, Ilara realized she was not leaving herself behind, but bringing her whole self forward for the first time. The vastness of space between worlds was nothing compared to the distance she had already traveled, from shame to pride, from isolation to connection, from hiding to shining. She was, at last, free to illuminate the darkness on her own terms, with a brilliance that was perfectly, gloriously imperfect. Theo's hand found hers as Earth grew visible in the distance. "Welcome to the beginning," he said. Ilara's luminescence pulsed in response, not with uncertainty or fear, but with the steady rhythm of a heart that had found its home among the stars.